Finlay MacLaren, how are you today?
I'm very well, Casey. How are you?
Doing fantastic. I think we're going to have a nice
Wonderful.
little chat today.
Oh, that's the aim. That's the aim.
I think this will be great. I think if we can continue this with some regularity, we can tackle some current, topics that are bothering us, things we're seeing in the nutrition world.
Mhm.
And yeah, hopefully our if anybody cares, our opinions might help people make better
Yeah.
decisions about their life and what they choose to do, especially around things like nutrition.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I think we're both immersed in speaking to so many different viewpoints in the health and fitness world that sometimes our own opinions and viewpoints get a little lost when we're seeing crazy stuff pop up in the media.
So on that note, what have you seen lately as far as that goes? I've seen some headlines, but I've on purpose been kind of wanting to learn about this from you.
Mm.
So
Mm.
saw a few headlines, saw some Twitter posts about some news in the obesity world. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I think the latest segment that sort of caught fire was from Dr. Fatima Cody Stanford, who was seen in that 60-minute interview talking about obesity, the problems with obesity, and basically laying out her claim that 80% of obesity is genetic. And I'm of the opinion that this has either been misrepresented or she's deliberately misrepresented this, because from the way I see it is obesity may well be genetic in the sense that it runs in families. No pun intended there. But the fact that the 80% of people who have obesity, it's the issue is coming from the bad habits that are passed on by parents rather than a genetic disposition that means that the people with obesity have no option but to be obese, regardless of sleep quality, exercise, nutrition. Her main statement was regardless of all of these factors, all these lifestyle factors, these people will still be obese because it's genetic. So that lit the fire under many people. I think Lane Norton did a specific video on it. Many other people did specific videos on it. And my initial thoughts were this is just removing agency from individuals. Like people are going to think, oh, I've got no choice but to be obese.
Hmm. So what did she base this claim on? Is there a new study that I'm unaware of? Did we learn something recently that sparked this?
Well, I think she's at Harvard. She's Harvard and she's a professor at Harvard and she studies specifically obesity. And I think she's looking at the genes that have been passed on from parents to children are generally obviously the same. You know, they have the same genetic makeup, and she's basing their obesity specifically just on that genetic level rather than bringing in epigenetics. I don't know if she's an overall obesity researcher, so she can point to many different studies that show the genes here passed on to the children, and the children are also fat. I mean, I forget the actual specific gene, but it's PPA4Y or PPAY, and it's a specific gene that when it's turned on, it sort of encourages fat storage, and things that encourage that are estrogen encourages that gene to be switched on. So I think on the basis of these different studies, she's highlighting that on a genetic level, these people are genetically disposed to being obese, and regardless of these lifestyle factors, they will still be obese.
Interesting. Okay, so more questions about that. So how do you think of genetics and epigenetics? I've been kind of the idea that the saying goes that like genetics load the gun, but epigenetics
Mm,
pulls the trigger. So it's almost like the ApoE4 gene, which we've identified as being a very old gene. And if you have two copies, one from your mom, one from your dad, you have, say, like a 20 times greater likelihood of developing something like Alzheimer's in your life. But there's many people who have the two copies and still never develop Alzheimer's. So it doesn't happen with everybody, which would say, like, yeah, you might be more predisposed or less predisposed because of your genes, but that's not what makes that actually happen. Is that how you look at genetics and epigenetics?
yeah, I think. I mean, like a caveat: I'm not a geneticist. Like I have some idea around it. And I think the main thing is if you look back at the 1950s and 1940s, like where was the prevalence of obesity? And then you look now and you go, hang on, we've got 30%, 40% of the population is now obese. Our genetics haven't changed that much. So therefore, it must have been lifestyle factors that have changed. So that's the epigenetics aspect. Epigenetics is our lifestyle. And our genetics is everything that we have the potential to develop diseases with the right epigenetics around us.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so you know how I feel about Formula One. I just
Yeah,
got this great book.
Yeah, let's just link this all back to Formula One.
Exactly. I'm going to do that every episode, I'm pretty sure. Beautiful pictures. This goes back through the history of Formula One as a sport from the 1950s on through the 1960s. And there's beautiful color pictures from the 1970s where you see entire crowds. You don't see overweight, let alone obesity. There may be a little bit as the years are going, but if you're watching this, you can kind of see like there's a picture of an entire crowd, and there's not one overweight person that I can identify, let alone obese. And now
that guy with his shirt off over on the right, he looks a little tubby.
a lot of them had their shirt off. Must have been a hot day. Must have been a hot day. But yeah, like it, and it's funny. You go out today, and it's like I call it like metabolic Where's Waldo. It's like the opposite. Like go into a store or a mall or a public space and count how many obviously metabolically healthy people that you see. And it's like Where's Waldo? Like there's not many out there that you say, okay, wow, he eats well. You can almost reverse engineer it. And almost like once you get used to it, you can kind of like say, oh, I know how that guy eats, or I know what that guy does for workouts. You could probably be a lot more accurate. But you're right. If this were a genetic problem, wouldn't that assume that people have been obese for many, many generations, hundreds of thousands of years? We would have lived with this problem, right? Am I misunderstanding that?
No, 100%. I'm with you there. I mean, I think that I saw a study the other day, and it was looking at 900 different genes and the reaction of those genes when someone had a high carbohydrate diet versus, or when someone had a high carbohydrate breakfast versus when someone had a high protein breakfast. And something like 600 of those genes were activated with the high protein breakfast, and something like 140 were activated with the high carbohydrate breakfast. So like there is big impact on our diet in how our genes are functioning, far beyond just fat storage and energy levels. You know, this is why things accumulate over time. If you're constantly turning on the same genes, then that has a corresponding impact for your hormones and your cellular health and everything in between. So yeah, it's a huge web. And like the problem is like so many people are getting more and more unhealthy, so that drags the average down. So when people look at other people and go, hang on, I'm not doing too bad, like I'm not very overweight, like they're actually still obese. Like by the technical terms, they're still obese. Like 30, I mean, I'm not saying BMI is a good measure of fat stats or anything in between, but like anything over 35 BMI is obese. I think, or it might even be over 30. And like over anything over 30% body fat for men is obese, and anything over 35% body fat for women is obese. So there's a lot of people that fit into that category who people would look at and go, oh, he's just a bit overweight. Because we think of obesity as someone who is like, you know, stuck in a chair, can't fit in an airplane seat, and, you know, is wheezing and panting all day. That's not the definition. You know, the definition is actually closer to a lot of people's reality than we realize.
Yeah, I think back kind of culturally to one of my favorite shows. The first like 9 or 10 seasons still hold up, still very, very funny. The Simpsons, released in, you know, the late 80s, early 90s, and you look at Homer Simpson's body type, and like I would have called that obese back then. And that body type is now so, I guess, normalized, average.
Bod.
Yeah, it's like totally accepted. That's just like normal. Carrying a few extra pounds today. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. And like, it's such a delicate balance, because like I put a post up the other day of the Calvin Klein advert, the new Calvin Klein advert, 2022 versus 1999. I think one is you know, quite a ripped guy. I think it's like Brad Pitt or Matt Damon or someone with Kate Moss, and they're looking, you know, they're looking good. Kate Moss maybe a bit skinny. And then fast forward to 2022, and it's like two obese models with a guy with a sports bra on. And you're kind of like, hang on, are we normalizing this? You know, like the Homer Simpson thing, like everyone, like you say, you look at it and be like, oh, he's fat. Now it's like, oh, he's just got a dad bod. You know, it's this insidious like normalization. And now the body positivity movement, which is great in some ways because we don't want people to be depressed about like their body, but we still want them to realize, hang on, like this is not healthy. This is the same way of having a disease, like, you know, like having diabetes in itself. Like this is a huge risk factor.
Yeah, no, I agree. You're absolutely right. And here's where we get into the 2023 problems and shaming and all that stuff. And I don't feel like it's shaming to say, not that, you know, you're obese and it's your fault, but there's a certain way that message can be empowering. And what I'm hearing you say from the message from this researcher feels to me like, okay, you're obese, there's nothing you can do about it, it's completely unempowering. And so where's the motivation for that person to try to get healthy, especially when they know they did it, they took the advice, they did the exercise.
The fucked up thing is she's on the 2025 committee. It's like the Academy of Dietetics and Nutrition committee to reassess the dietary, what do you call it, the food pyramid and the dietary information. But she's on the committee. So like, if that's her angle and that's her thought process, then she's not going to be focusing on nutrient density or like any of this other stuff. It's going to be perpetuation of the current status quo.
That's right. What would be the point of her being on the nutritional committee if she's not admitting that nutrition is a big part of obesity?
Well, I mean, it's just bought and paid for, isn't it? Like that's what it rolls around to for me. It's like it's just bought and paid for. Like,
yeah. So if we break this down, and we have to acknowledge first of all that this is a problem. And again, look around, it's a problem. We know the numbers, it's a problem. We have a huge problem with obesity and diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and all kinds of mental disorders, and all of these chronic diseases that are developing in younger and younger people as the years go on. So we accept that is a problem. We also see the numbers from years past and also anecdote from the books and the pictures that like, okay, this wasn't affecting people nearly as much back then as it is today. So what is going on? And so we have to say like, okay, are people not following the advice? Like we've been telling people to move more and eat less for a long time. We've been telling people that they should increase the amount of fruits and vegetables they should eat. We've told people they need to burn more calories. We get activity trackers, and I see people, you know, dialing their stats on the treadmill and run until it says they burned a certain amount of calories. So what is it? Like, are people just lazy slobs and they're not following that advice? Because the advice seems to be out there. And my observation through my career is that people are trying. They don't want to be obese. They don't want to be demented at age 50. Like, what do you think? Like, am I missing something there?
I don't know. I think for some it's so different. It's so multivariate, isn't it? Like, I'm reading Eastro Generation at the moment. I don't know if you've read it before. Like,
no, I haven't.
And oh my god, it's a frightening and stark read. I mean, like,
sure, it's terrifying.
It's absolutely terrifying. I mean, like many health books out there, but so Anthony J. Gray or Anthony J. I'm butchering it now, but Eastro Generation. It's talking about, many people will have heard about BPAs, phthalates, maybe, like glyphosate, and then like as a herbicide and fungicide, but there's also another one called atrazine, and so that it's the same way. So all of these chemicals, they put it in plastics to make plastics clearer, because we associate, you know, clear plastic with pure plastic. No one wants to buy cloudy plastic. So BPA everyone knows about, but there are like 5 other different types of plastic that do the same thing as BPA, but we just haven't had the outcry to stop it. And the problems with these, plastics, there's also the same with plant estrogenics. So like things that are in soy, very high in soy, things that are phthalates. They're another type of plastic additive. Atrazine is sprayed on lots of crops that leaches into the soil, that goes into the waterways. And because they're fat soluble and not water soluble, that they act very much in the same way. They mimic estrogen, and they're very hard to remove through filtration process. So we go up to, there've been studies that they've done deep into Alaska, and there is accumulation of these phthalates and BPAs and atrazines and different estrogenics in polar bears and sea otters. And like the EE2 is a huge one, because that's the one that women take for that birth control, and that goes into the water, and it's not generally removed by regular filtration process. So, and in plastic bottles, it leaches out and with any sunlight, because it's hydrophobic. So it wants to sort of swim around. It won't mix with water well, but it stays in there. So like there's huge accumulation of this stuff in dense population centers. So they tested in like dense populations in China, and they've tested in the US, and US, funnily enough, is one of the only countries that will not remove atrazine from their spraying schedules and crop schedules. Like there's a little bit, like a minute amount allowed in Europe and less in China, but the US uses something like 80 million pounds a year. That was in 2017. And so anyway, look, think of all these different compounding estrogenics. Estrogen then gets into your water supply, you're showering in it, it's in your soaps, it's basically, think of anything modern that contains plastic, that is estrogenic. So that's getting into us, that's getting into our bloodstream. They look at the studies in frogs who have had this stuff swimming around. It feminizes them, it sterilizes them, it in relatively small amounts. So we're ingesting, as men, as women, estrogens. Estrogens turn on that PPA4 gene. I'm going to say PPA4. Like it's PPA4 gamma. It's one of the genes that switches on fat storage. Like you'll see that womanly shape whereby they want to store more fat around the hips, they want to store more fat around the chest, they want to store more fat around the stomach, protection, and in an evolutionary sense, and around the top of the legs. We are like that introduction of all these plastics and everything also corresponds with this rise in obesity that we've seen. So the estrogen levels are coming up in men, the testosterone levels are coming down. That already implies an increased level of fat storage and a reduction in muscle mass. The same applies to women. And so that's a huge factor that's not being taken in to this whole argument. Yes, our like processed food consumption has gone through the roof. Yes, our seed oils have gone through the roof. That's why I think it's multivariate. Like we're definitely consuming too many calories. We're definitely consuming too much sugar, but we're also polluting our waterways and riverways and drinking water with these estrogenic compounds, which are feminizing us. Like it's undeniable. It's and then you've got everything else that leads on from there, like the cancers and like the lack of motivation in men. And like you can see a corresponding reduction in the amount of university attendance for men, while the university attendance for women starts to increase. And you could say, okay, that's
Wow.
political factors, with women being encouraged more into the workplace and encouraged more to educate and encouraged out of the home environment. But there's more going on here. There's more than meets the eye. Like this stuff is being banned in different regions around the world. These estrogenic compounds, but not so much in the US. And you just wonder whether there's more political pressure or there's more business pressure. That's just, so much intertwines here. I mean, I kind of been getting my head blown by this book lately, so it's top of mind for me.
Sounds really good. I started reading last year. I started reading Dopamine Nation, and in 2 chapters, I was so depressed about how screwed we all are that I never finished it.
I'm
So good on you
writing
for
that down.
continuing to read. So depressing.
Yeah, well, I'm
Okay,
mostly
interesting.
continuing because at the end of the book he says he's going to tell us how to avoid it.
Yeah,
So
good. So that's my question. That would be my next question. If I'm sitting in front of a client and they would be willing to change maybe one thing about them, how do I know which direction to go? Do I try to change their nutrition? Do I try to change their exercise? Do I try to get plastics out of their life? Like if they're only willing to do one thing, in your experience, like what thing would where would you focus your time?
I like mine has evolved. It used to be physical activity that was just getting them moving, and then it moved to nutrition, like let's refine their nutrition more. And now at the same time as that, the first thing I think is waking up at the same time and going to bed at the same time, because that sleep wake light cycle circadian rhythm drives so many metabolic processes, drives the turnover in your gut, drives the renewal of your gut lining in your digestive system. It drives your internal clock, how your hormones function in the morning, your cortisol, your melatonin, your like all of this stuff. Getting that synced up actually allows better hormone function and better senses of wellness once you get people outside in the sun, because a lot of people will have adequate nutrition. They'll have enough protein in their diet. They might have too much junk food, but it's the light exposure, and then that's what I start with. If you told me to do one, if you asked me one thing, light exposure in the morning, getting up at the same time, going to bed at the same time, and refining your circadian rhythm. That's what I really think is a game changer that most people don't take in. Why? How about you? What do you think?
That's a great answer. Frankly, that surprises me a little bit. I know how important circadian rhythms are and how important light is, and I try to get sunlight every day. It surprises me. That wouldn't be my starting point for most people. I do see the person that you just described absolutely not getting enough protein, like way under protein, or
Yeah, true.
snacking all the time, or whatever. I don't know. I don't think that the advice that we gave people, started giving people, that started in the 60s, was saying cholesterol is going to give you a heart attack. Saturated fat has a lot of cholesterol. That then kind of morphed into governments making recommendations. One of the things that we can look at, this isn't a perfect way to study this, but one of the things we can look at is food waste. What kinds of foods are we wasting now? And based on those numbers, we are following the advice. We eat far more plants now than we used to. We eat far more fruits and vegetables, way less butter and red meat than we used to. And again, that's not a perfect way to study it, but I think the advice itself is flawed for nutrition specifically. And I feel like I can get more people going in the right direction by getting people the right dietary information, and specifically getting them on a lot more animal protein. That would be my one lever that I would try to pull for more cases than not.
100%. Yeah, I'm with you there. I think sometimes it's so hard to say what would be your first thing without seeing the client and seeing how fucked up they are at the start. Like if they were on a diet of ultra processed food and they were getting up at 6 a.m. and going to bed at 9 because they got an office job, then you're right. Like I think the first thing would be that ultra processed food and like getting their nutrition on point. And then, but if I saw a guy who's like doesn't have his routine nailed down, like doesn't get up at the right time, he's struggling with sleep, which so many people struggle with sleep. Like it's actually unbelievable. No one can put their phone down at 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. They're on their phone until like 2 a.m. and then they get up at 7 or 8, and like it just absolutely floors you. So I don't know. I think the key thing is like getting them to take one step, almost regardless what it is.
Yeah.
Because people are so either deficient in nutrients or deficient in sunlight or lack of movement, that any small step in the right direction is going to make them feel better and going to make them feel happy about having taken a step. So, but it's
good point.
It's if they get overwhelmed by like, oh my God, I'm not doing all of this stuff, then that's where the danger is. It's like, then all the positive feelings go and you just focus on the negative.
Yeah, no, that's a really great point, and I love that. If we go back to this interview, I don't know if you ended up watching the whole thing or if you saw part of what she was saying.
Mm,
I would expect, again, I haven't seen it, but I would expect to hear a person like that use like straw man arguments and
mm,
say things like, "We know that," or "Experts
yeah,
agree that," or
yeah,
like use common sense kind of things that
mm,
confuse people. They're
mm,
not really based on science. And so they get distracted from the right advice, which could actually help them. And they start following bad advice that is guaranteed not to help them, that then makes them question, well, why isn't this working? To only have an answer that is, well, it's genetic. There's
mm,
nothing you can do about it. We told you to eat fruits and vegetables and work out. So now at this point, if you have obesity that's genetic, let's put you on prescriptions.
mm,
Let's sell you bariatric surgeries. Like, there's so many things that you will be pitched and sold, and you'll probably try because you're sick of being sick. You know what I mean?
yeah,
They have a certain way of talking that makes them sound like experts when they're really distracting. It's almost like
yeah,
Coke, being part of the energy balance equation. Why they have the little
mm,
sticker on their vending machines that says
yeah.
balance what you eat, drink, and do. They're like, oh, great, I'll drink the Coke and go on a walk, and everything will be fine.
Yeah. I mean, I think some of the problem is like she's so deep in, I mean, maybe she does really believe it. Like she's so deep in that her field of research of genetics and obesity that, it's like for a pharmacologist, every answer is in a pill, and they will try and develop a pill that fixes everything. And then they're not looking at the bigger picture of health and wellness and everything. Like I'd taken in very little account of things like overall sunlight, like, I was like, sunlight increases your vitamin D. Okay, you need to just get outside and get, your hour of sunlight a day. And then when you look at like how how the circadian rhythm works and how it functions and like all of the hormonal stuff in between, then you start to see, hang on, okay, there's a part of the picture that I wasn't taking into account. It's the same analogy, like for every hammer, everything is a nail. You're like, there's one function for our very myopic minded different segments of academia. That's why things like functional medicine are so good, because they bring in so many different aspects. But it's very muddy water, because like insurance companies won't want to insure people for different sections of their Medicare because naturopaths or anything aren't accredited to be covered. Insurance may only cover you to go to one cancer specialist, or they may only cover you they're not going to cover you to go to a personal trainer or a nutritionist, or it's very segmented. People are sort of pinned in by their options, which are often just the very specialized doctors who want to prescribe their medications and do their bariatric surgeries.
Yeah, well, maybe that's a really great takeaway from this conversation as like a of what barometer, excuse me, of what
Mm,
people could be looking for when they're confused by this stuff. Because a lot of people watch 60 Minutes, a lot of people are obese, a lot of people are now going to think that this is genetic and they need to go to that medical system to fix the problem with drugs or surgeries. So it's almost like if you just ask the question, like, if I go deep enough and find out who is making the money, is that going
mm.
to tell me, like, if I'm generating a lot of money for a system, does that tell me that then I should avoid that system and somebody else might have a better message that's more truthful? I don't know.
Yeah, I think the problem with the whole pharmaceutical stuff is that it's made so much money and it protects itself with that money. So like, that's there is a feedback loop. Like the more money it makes, the more it can protect its interest. The more able it is to protect its interest, the more money it makes. And like, so the whole way it goes round. So I'm just kind of suspicious on, you can look at stuff on a I hate to say the common sense basis, because that's the straw man argument, but like on the common sense level of, look at how much advertising is done on
Yeah.
pharmaceuticals and bariatric surgeries and stuff. Look at how much problem we have with obesity. Is obesity a million-year-old disease that we're trying to solve? No, it's a problem of lifestyle factors that's been brought about by the way we live. So therefore, the answers are more than likely in lifestyle or in, pollution or whatever else has changed in the last 50 to 100 years. Like, this is not something that I believe we need to try and solve with a pill or anything in between. That's not to say that some people won't get benefit from these medications and stuff. I think there probably will be benefit, but I think then you have to weigh the benefits with the costs, and the costs are probably going to be, you're going to be spending money on expensive drugs for the rest of your life. You're going to have side effects for the rest of your life. And you're going to be passing on the same habits that you had before to your children, who are then going to have the same problems and then going to have the same medication and the same side effects. And then everything in between. You're not going to have the benefit of feeling how clear-headed you are with a good diet, or feeling your body, and like everything in between. I mean, I'm not sure I've got the answers. Mate.
Yeah, well, it's a good point, and maybe something we should pick up on our next discussion again. But yeah, no, you're right. It sucks because the people that's tough for are the ones that are doing their best to follow the advice, and they're told a wrong message, and it's generating a lot of money, and then to be told that it's all genetic, and they're completely disempowered to continue to try something else or talk to somebody else and just blindly trust these systems. It's a real shame. It's too bad.
Yeah. But we're I think a lot of people are heading in the right direction. I think a lot of the veil is lifting. Well, I think Dr. Pran said it the other day, like, our health system is splitting. One side is going by acknowledging that our body is incredible and given the right environment can do incredible things and heal many illnesses. And the other side is like, medical science is the only way forward. I can solve everything with a pill. And they're getting more and more polarized. We're just seeing overall polarization of everything.
Yeah, I agree. And I see that with my work. I know you see it with your work. We talked to Hal Cramner the other day, who owns a bunch of assisted living facilities in Arizona. And not every one of his patients or residents is willing to do a low carbohydrate or carnivore diet. He's first started years ago trying to introduce more plants in their diet, and the residents hated it. So he started learning about keto and low carb. And again, not every resident wants to do it, but like, one lady has lost 140 pounds. Other ladies are remembering names of people that they didn't know before. A 98-year-old went on a cruise with one of the employees and his family, and was like all smiles for weeks. And they're just quietly feeding these people like lots of eggs and bacon. And then the other residents see, what are they getting? I want to do what they're doing. The staff, I talked to one of the staff members who's like, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've never taken somebody off of insulin. We do it all the time. I love coming to work now.
Wow.
Like, it's just
amazing.
There is a split. There is a delta, like you said. And that is what is encouraging me. Like, messages that come from, even just people like us. Like, we don't have huge followings, but we're hosting people and highlighting these shows and showing people that there is a way that you can actually turn your life around and get healthy. And that's what makes me really positive and optimistic about all of this.
Yeah.
Yes, there's a mainstream saying that obesity is genetic, but there's a swell of people that are getting better. They're healing in a lot of different ways. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is amazing. I mean, the thing I'm trying to, and I'm sure you're as open-minded as well, is trying to not get stuck in an echo chamber, because it's so easy to get stuck in this echo chamber of like, it's just carnivore, it's just keto, or it's just X, Y, and it's just Z. Like, I'm speaking to a guy called Dr. Alan Desmond tomorrow, and he is like a big vegan proponent, and he's a big gastroenterologist. I think talks about gut health the whole time. So I'm really fascinated to talk to him, because I'm trying not to go in with like a combative mindset and say like, but what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And like, I just want to hear the guy out. I just want to hear him out. And I think I really want to hear these other perspectives. And it might be that we're missing something, but but I think I'm like, I'm you at the moment. I'm convinced that low carb and an animal-based diet is a foundation of good human health.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to that. I know your interview style and the way you're very non-combative. And I think that message will come out, and I think that'll be very interesting. I'd love to hear the argument as well. One of our recent guests, who is known as Low Ox Grandma on Instagram, she made the point, like, are we all different? We are all different. We're definitely different. My hair color is different than your hair color, but we're not like different species. We're not vastly different. And so, it's an interesting thing to consider. Maybe people are very different and need very different diets, or maybe it just is like one central core to the diet with very little variance could be best for everybody. I don't know. It's an interesting question.
Yeah.
Can't wait for that episode to come out.
Hard to know. I think it's going to be out in, I don't know, at least hopefully he turns up. That's the main thing. I'm not going to jinx it.
There you go. There you go. Exactly. Exactly. Well, this has been a lot of fun. I think this has been a good first episode.
Epic.